Welcome to Dave Talks Comics. I'm Dave. This is my podcast where I talk about comic books, cartoons, and comic book conventions. This is episode 165. All past episodes can be streamed or downloaded from the program's website, davetalkscomics.com. In addition to the program's website, this podcast can also be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook. You can find my notes and what I have read at davetalkscomics.net. And usually I put a disclaimer in here or a spoiler warning in here, but this time there's not going to be one because I'm going to be talking about the first day of Heroes Con 2019. Before I get to that part of the program, I just wanted to say that the audio quality of that part of the program isn't great, and a lot of that comes down to the fact that I was pretty tired at that point in the day, because what I usually do, and what I did this year also, is in the evenings I record the episode, basically. This part right here I'm recording a few days later, but usually at the end of the day I have my notes. Maybe I make some more notes, and then I sit down in my hotel room and I make my recording of what I saw and all the things I did during the day. First day of Heroes Con, and I'm going to get into this in the episode a little bit. I drove down that day, so I was pretty tired by the time I got there. Then I spent time at the show, then I went out to get a bite to eat, then I came back to the room. The acoustics in the room were a little not exactly what I hoped they would be. And I certainly sound tired in this recording. I hope that doesn't, and it's a little, it's not stilted, but there's a lot of stopping and starting, and to be perfectly honest, I recorded this more than once. So the recording you're getting is the last recording I made, which is the one that I'm happiest with, I think. Because all the other recordings that I made, and I think I actually got like a half hour into some of those recordings before I stopped. And the reason why I stopped was because I had not gotten far enough into talking about my day. I spent way too much time talking about the panels. And you'll get some notes on the panels. And I think that's all I want to say for right now before I get into the actual recording I made in the evening of day one. And then after that recording, I have some more notes, some follow-up on some of the things that I said during that recording. It's Friday night. The convention is closed for the day. It's been a long day for me. It started pretty early. I got up at 4 o'clock this morning. I left at about 6:30. I finally got it took me about 8 hours to get to Charlotte. Actually, a little under 8 hours, I think. Let's see, if I left at 6, 8. Yeah, it took me a little less than 8 hours to get to Charlotte. I made 3 stops along the way. I took my chances and almost ran out of gas at one point. I stopped for a very early lunch at 10 o'clock. Traffic wasn't bad, especially leaving the DC area wasn't bad. I hit a couple choke points. I think I just choked. I hit a couple choke points on the Beltway, but after that it wasn't bad at all until just before I got to Charlotte. There was some construction on 85 that really slowed things down, where 4 lanes were narrowed down to 2 lanes, and until we really everybody got into there, it was very slow. So I got to the convention at 2:15. Well, I got to Charlotte at 2:15. I was parking the car at 2:15. And I parked in a garage that I've used before. It's only $5 a day on the weekends, but on the weekdays it's considerably more than that. When I left the garage, it was $20 for parking. I think I'd been there for about 5 hours, something like that. And I think that's the maximum charge for a day. I didn't have any problem getting my badge, although, usually they give you a lanyard with like a badge, I guess, on it, but which isn't really your badge. Your badge is your wristband. That's what you need to get into the show each day. But they were out of lanyards. So they asked me, do you want the badge, the card? And I said, yeah, I want it. And I do like the logo they have for this year's show. It's done by Stan Sakai and Sergio Aragones. It's, what's that name? The rabbit. It's Gru the Wanderer and... Gru the Wanderer, and who's the rabbit? Oh, God, I can't remember what the rabbit's name is. Is it a Ronin? No. I can't remember. Maybe it'll come back to me. But I'm definitely getting one of the T-shirts. There's a T-shirt they have with the convention logo on it. And this year, I really like the T-shirt. I'm getting the yellow one, I think. So I had a bit of a scare when I got into the show because one of the panels that I wanted to go to that I thought was supposed to be tomorrow or Sunday, when I looked at the program guide, it was listed for today, but I went to the room and it wasn't there. So I don't know what, I think there was a misprint in the program guide. Somebody screwed something up. Either that or the panel got moved and then got canceled. I don't know what it is. So I went to 2 panels today. The first one was the Cartoonist Kayfabe Live panel, which is Jim Rugg and Ed Piskor, who have a YouTube show called Cartoonist Kayfabe, and then they have all these little spin-off shows from that, like the one that I watched recently is called Read More Comics, where they're looking at the works of Alan Moore, and on that one it actually wasn't Jim Rugg wasn't on that one, but it was Ed Piskor and Tom Scioli. And I strongly recommend checking that one out, especially if you've read For the Man Who Has Everything. I think it's quite good. The video was quite good. The book's good, too, and the cartoon is good, too, if you've seen that. In fact, I kind of prefer the cartoon. I think I said that on the episode of Dave Talks Comics, where I talked about For the Man Who Has Everything. So they talked about a number of things. They talked about Heroes Con. They talked about their experiences at Heroes Con, their first Heroes Con, bin diving at Heroes Con, driving to and from Heroes Con, weird experiences they had there. They told a very funny story from their first time at Heroes Con. And all this was recorded by, they had people setting up and recorded it. So it will be released on YouTube, and I will provide links. Hopefully it'll be up by the time I'm posting this episode. So that was the first panel I went to. I went down onto the show floor. I looked around for a while. I tried to talk to a couple people, but they were busy. I wound up talking to somebody else who I was kind of interested in talking to, and that's Joey Weiser. Talked to him a little bit about what he's been up to lately in terms of the comic books he's working on. I think this latest is called something like Ghost Hog, and he gave me a copy of the Free Comic Book Day comic of that. I bought, well, the first thing I bought from him years ago at SPX was his book Cavemen in Space, which I enjoyed. And then a couple years ago, I want to say, I bought Merman, the first book of Merman from him. It must have been 2 years ago. It may have been at SPX 2 years ago, but it was certainly 2 years ago, because he was not at SPX last year, I don't think. And I was not at Heroes Con last year, so it must have been 2 years ago that I bought that. And I gave that to my nephew, and I have heard nothing out of him about it. So I didn't have anything to report to Joey. But that was nice talking to him. And then I walked around a little more. I was sticking mostly to Artist Alley, just seeing who was there and seeing what there was to see. It was fairly open. There weren't too many people walking around. It's Friday. Friday's usually a less busy day. I'm expecting tomorrow it will be considerably more busy. I talked to Scott Fogg, who was somebody I talked to a few years ago. He was doing a different book back then. I didn't catch the name of the new book they're doing, but he and another artist are working on something. And back then he was working with an artist named Mark Thomas. And they had a book, something about aliens coming to Earth, something about a character named Phileas, which of course makes me think Phileas Fogg, but Phileas Fogg I think is the name of the main character from Around the World in 80 Days. So it can't have been Phileas Fogg. Phileas something knows that there are aliens out there or something like that. So we chatted for a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes, I don't know. I walked around a little more. I wound up talking to somebody about a comic book that I kind of lost interest in when I found out how much it cost. It was $10 for a single comic book, not a graphic novel, not 100 pages, just 23 pages or 28 pages or something like that. And $10 seemed excessive to me. It was a book called Tuskegee Airs. It sounded very interesting. It involves both links to the Tuskegee Airmen, and also it involves giant robots. But I thought it sounded interesting. And I was interested until I heard that the comic book, the first issue, each issue of the comic book was $10. So I said I would take a look online, and I thanked the person who was trying to pitch it to me, who was trying to sell it to me, and I moved along. The second panel I went to was the Before Superman panel, and this was a retrospective kind of panel. This was a panel looking back at comic books before Superman came around. The panelists were Nikki Wheeler Nicholson, who was the granddaughter of Major Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson, who was one of the founders of DC Comics, or at least, or the, not DC Comics, but the predecessor of DC Comics, the company that eventually became DC Comics. And it was something like National Publications, but the name was a little more involved than that. And he got his start in pulp magazines, and she talked a little bit about that. She talked a little bit, she had a slideshow, which I kind of missed because it was hard to see it from where I was sitting, but I wanted to sit up front so I could record what they had to say. And I recorded it, and I wasn't sure how it was going to come out because the air conditioning was making a lot of noise, but I've checked, and it seems to have come out okay. So maybe I will be able to post that panel, but of course it won't include the visuals that were part of the panel, which I didn't see anyway. So listening to it, you'll get about as much from it as I did. And I did ask a question at the panel. Towards the end of the panel, I asked a question about, because the two of the people on the panel, Nikki Wheeler Nicholson and Athena Finger, I mentioned Nikki's ties to comic books. Athena is the granddaughter of Bill Finger. Now, neither of them met their grandfathers. And so there were some questions about, well, how did you get to know them? How well do you feel you know them at this point? And so at one point it felt like Athena had answered that question, but I wanted to know more from Nikki about her response to that question. So she went into, you know, where she got her information and how she got her information. And in the case of Athena, she had the opportunity to talk to people who actually worked with her grandfather. Whereas in the case of Nikki, most of what she got was from family members. So it was a little different in that respect. And I will probably end up posting, if the little snippet that I've listened to at this point is any indication of how good the panel was, how good the recording of the panel is, then I will be posting it. So after that panel, I went back. Oh yeah, and I ran into Mike Myers after. Apparently he was in the room. I didn't even notice because I walked all the way up to the front. I sat in the front row so I could get a good recording if possible. And then at the end of the panel, Mike walks up to the front, and so, you know, we talked for a minute or so about the panel. He recommended that I watch Batman and Bill or something like that. It's about Bill Finger. It's a documentary about Bill Finger, and it is on that streaming service. What is it? Hulu. No. Yes, that's right, Hulu, which I do have. So I really should watch it. I watched the Grant Morrison documentary. I watched the Image documentary, neither of which really impressed me. So I probably should watch the Bill Finger documentary. Just because Mike likes it doesn't necessarily mean that I will, but I'm interested enough in the subject matter to give it a chance. So after that, I had thought about going to there was an anthropomorphic characters panel, and I believe Mark Evanier was supposed to be moderating the panel, but I think what happened, but when I was down on the show floor, I thought I heard Chris Schweitzer saying something about taking over a panel for Mark Evanier, and so I'm wondering if that's the panel that he took over, because later, when I went downstairs to walk around some more from between 6 and 7 o'clock, the last hour that the show was open today, I noticed that Chris Schweitzer wasn't at his table. So maybe I should have gone to that instead of walking around. I don't know. I mean, it was Stan Sakai and David Peterson and somebody else. Anyhow, I did wind up doing a little bit of shopping. I was trying to avoid doing that, but one of the tables I walked past, I saw some comic books that looked kind of old, and they were in a box that were labeled $1 a piece. And so I couldn't resist, and so I started digging through the box, and I found a bunch of things. I found 5 comic books. 3 of them fill holes in my collection, and 2 of them were just things that looked too good to pass up. And I'm going to go through these not in the order I found them, but in chronological order. So these are comics from the 1960s to the 1980s. The first one is from a series that I don't have any issues of. So this is the very first issue that I have of this series. And this is All American Men of War. And this is issue 107. And this is from January, February of 1965. And this is a story starring Johnny Cloud, Captain Johnny Cloud of the, isn't that interesting? Oh, the U.S. Army Air Force. Okay. Is that what they were calling it back then? I thought it was the Army Air Corps. Huh. But it says U.S. Army Air Force, and he says USAF. But I thought this was a World War II. Were they calling it that? I think this is not completely accurate. Yeah, I'm not sure if this depiction of this plane is completely accurate. And it is a World War II story because they're fighting the Germans. It's definitely, and there's a swastika, so this is definitely World War II. Huh. Interesting. Anyway, a lot of these war comics in this period were it would be like an anthology book where you'd have like 2 or 3 stories in each issue. But this one is actually a full-length story. And when I looked at the art, I was like, is this Alex Toth? And so then I looked it up. It's not Alex Toth. I think it's, I want to say it's Sheldon Moldoff, but I'm not certain on that. But of course, this is from an era when they didn't put the credits for in the comic books, and you have to know who it was. Okay, so that's the first comic I bought. The second comic I bought, which just looked so weird that I had to buy it, and this is Supernatural Thrillers #1 from Marvel. This is it is December of 72 issue, and it's The Thing That Couldn't Die, featuring It, The Thing That Couldn't Die, from the world-famous Chiller by Theodore Sturgeon. And I guess part of what turned me on to this is the fact that it's drawn by Maurice Severin. And the script is by Roy Thomas. Like I said, it doesn't look great, but I'm kind of curious to read this. It's not awful. It doesn't look awful, but it was just such a, when am I going to find this again? And the cover's a bit dinged up. Yes, the cover's definitely dinged up. All of these comics are not in perfect shape. Okay, the third one I got is these next 3. Those 2 were kind of the oddities, and these next 3 are ones that fill holes. The first one, or the third one, the first one that fills a hole is Green Lantern #127. I bought a few issues of Green Lantern online a year or 2 ago, and for some reason the ones that I bought did not include issue 127. And when I went to try and find issue 127 online, it was like it would usually cost me at least $5 or $10, something like that. I could be wrong. At least in very nice shape, it would cost me quite a bit. So finding this for $1 was a real deal. So now I have like issues 125 to 130 or 129, something like that. So I had to buy this. I had to pick this up, and it's part of a storyline that has to do with not just Green Lantern, but the Green Lantern Corps. And so this issue is called Battleground Oa, and it's got all of the various Green Lanterns, at least as of then, on the cover. What did I read? There's a Tales of the Green Lantern Corps. There was a mini-series that was done in the early 80s, I think after this. I think it was after this. But, I mean, part of what interested me in this is the reason why I bought those other issues originally was because I had read the first story with the first appearance of Krona, who of course is part of in Crisis on Infinite Earths, is credited, or I don't know if credited is the right word, but it's kind of suggested, or maybe it's more than suggested, that he's the reason why how the Anti-Monitor came to be, or something like that. And it all goes back. Actually, what brought me to that was a story from the tail end of the Great Darkness saga, which involves the Green Lanterns, or at least the Guardians of the Universe, or something like that. Yeah, it was all in that when I was talking about the Great Darkness saga. It was somewhere in one of those episodes, and that led me to the first appearance, which was also coincidentally the first team up of Hal Jordan and Alan Scott, the Green Lanterns of Earth 1 and 2, which like I was just saying was also the first appearance of Krona. And then that eventually led me to this mini-series, Tales of the Green Lantern Corps, which came out in something like 81, I want to say, or something like that. And that kind of led me back to this issue. And so I don't think I read those other issues because I think I was holding off until I got, and I wasn't blown away by that Tales of the Green Lantern Corps. It was not what I hoped it would be. It felt like a lot of, well, I don't want to say it felt just like filler, but I felt like there was a lot of filler in there. Okay, anyway, moving along. The fourth comic book I got is DC Comics Presents Annual Number 1. Now, I have annuals numbers 2, 3, and 4, so now I have all 4 of the annuals. And this is called Crisis on 3 Earths, and this involves Supermans of Earth 1 and 2 plus Lex Luthor of Earth 1 and 2 plus Superman of Earth 3 and Lex Luthor of Earth 3. And of course, Superman on Earth 3 is called Ultraman, not Superman. And Lex Luthor is Alexi Luthor or something like that, or Alex Luthor, or anyhow. I'd heard about this story, but I didn't have it. I'd never read it. I'm sure it's in a few collections. It's probably in a few collections. And then the bonus in this is that the last page is a text piece called Earths Beyond Earths by Rich Morrissey, which I have not read yet, but it looks definitely like something up my alley. So I am looking forward to reading this, even though I wasn't completely impressed by the other annuals from the other DC Comics Presents annuals. But this one's written by Marv Wolfman with art by Rich Buckler and Dave Hunt. And the letters are by John Costanza. Very nice. Okay. So the fifth and final comic that I bought today is Who's Who in the Legion of Superheroes number 7. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before. I picked up the first 6 of 7 issues of Who's Who in the Legion of Superheroes. So this was all that I was missing to complete my run of Who's Who in the Legion of Superheroes. It's not like I've read all the other issues, but this is a nice, how would I put it, reference series. That's the term I like to use. These are reference comic books. So those were $1 a piece. I thought that was a very good deal. Like I said, they're not in the best of shape. Some of them are kind of twisted a little bit, or the covers are dinged up, but hey, can't win them all. So I think that's, so then I after that, I left the show at about 7 when the show closed. I went back to my car, drove to the hotel, which is on the south side of town. I dropped off my stuff, then went out to get a bite to eat. I ended up walking to a place just a couple blocks from the hotel, a Vietnamese place, which is very good. I think it was called Banh Mi and Tea Company, something like that. Company or cafe, I'm not sure which it is. But I had a couple summer rolls. I had a banh mi. I thought both were very good. And I'll probably go somewhere else for dinner tomorrow night. But that was basically the sort of thing that I wanted. Well, I was very hungry because I hadn't eaten anything other than pretzels and water since 10 o'clock this morning. And by the time I got to the restaurant, it was like after 8 o'clock. So I was more than ready for a real bite to eat. So I've got all kinds of plans for tomorrow, but that's it for day 1 of HeroesCon. And now, here's Dave with some additional notes about day 1 of HeroesCon 2019. Well, actually, it's not just notes about that, but it's also notes about my recording about day 1 of the Comic-Con. The first thing, let's see, why don't I talk about the panels first a little bit, or at least I wanted to say a couple things. First, that the Cartoonist Kayfabe panel has not been released yet. I'm recording this a week after HeroesCon, and I just checked and there was nothing uploaded yet of their content from Heroes Con. I know that they did 4 panels. I believe that they recorded all 4 of them, but so far there's no new content on their YouTube channel. And once again, it's Cartoonist Kayfabe, and it's Kayfabe. Or you can look up Ed Piskor or Jim Rugg, and they probably will post links to those in their various feeds, whether it's, well, certainly on Twitter. I'm sure they will, because that's how I first became aware of them, or of the Cartoonist Kayfabe at least. And so I did not make a recording of that panel. The other panel that I went to on day 1 was the Before Superman panel. I did record that. The audio is audible. It is not great, but I think you can hear it. I made a couple edits to the audio in that I amplified the sound quality a little bit. There was some air conditioning going, which kind of interfered with the sound, but at least I thought it did when I was in the room. But going back to listen to it, you can hear it in the background. It's not that bad. What's actually more annoying a little bit is that there were a couple times when there's a panel in the room next door, and that panel gets a little loud, and you can hear it on the recording. So other than amplifying the audio, most of the audio, the only thing I did was to trim it at the beginning and the end. And actually, I think I walked in and they were just starting up. So I think I missed like the first 30 seconds of this panel. So I think it starts with them in mid. And as always, I don't add anything to this. I just try to clean up the audio a little bit. But I'm not trimming anything out other than the very end where I might have left it recording for a little while longer. Okay, so that's the panels. The other thing I wanted to mention was I made some references to episodes that I recorded that have some crossover with some of the things that I mentioned in this episode. So in episode 85, I talked about For the Man Who Has Everything. I talked about both the comic book and the cartoon. And that's episode 85 of Dave Talks Comics. Now, in episode 126, I talked about Legion of Superheroes number 295, which is included in the deluxe collection, or what, I'm not sure if that's the exact terminology for it, but the big collection of the Great Darkness saga, which is a story after the Great Darkness saga proper, but I think there's still some reverberations from the Great Darkness saga, and that has to do with the No More Green Lanterns on Earth story, or I think it was something like that. So I talked about that on that episode. And then on episode 135, I talked about Green Lantern number 40, which was the first meeting of Hal Jordan and Alan Scott. There's no way I'm forgetting Alan Scott's name. Hal Jordan and Alan Scott, which is an okay story. But anyway, you can listen to that episode, and it's not the whole episode that's on there. If you go to the website, the page, you'll see, I think I have time markings for when, but I might not. But it's only one comic book, and like I said, it's not like For the Man Who Has Everything, where I could go on talking about it for 15 or 20 minutes. I do have notes on that issue, and I also have notes on Green Lantern, on Tales of the Green Lantern Corps numbers 1 through 3 on my website. And there will be links to those. There'll be links to all of these episodes, plus links to my notes on these comic books that I just mentioned in the show notes on this episode and on the website as well. Now, I did make a mistake in that I said that the Tales of the Green Lantern Corps preceded these issues of Green Lantern that I have. So the issues that I have, these aren't all the issues, but this small run that I have of Green Lantern, numbers 125 to 128, are dated February of 1980 through May of 1980. And these have a story that involves the Quardians, the Weaponers of Quard. And, I didn't think about it until just now, but obviously they're called the Quardians because it sounds like Guardians. The Guardians of Oa and the Quardians. So, duh. I don't know why I never noticed that before. But anyway, there's this story that runs through those 4 issues. I think there's more in those issues than just that, but there's the one issue that I just got, number 127, is the one that features Green Lantern and the members of the Green Lantern Corps on the cover. And so I was interested in it after reading. I think I did some research, and what I was looking for issues of Green Lantern that had anything about Quard. And I think there's one early issue of Green Lantern, like in the 30s or 40s, that does, but that's from the 1960s, so that's going to be pretty expensive. So I haven't really made a strong effort to get that. But then there's this story, which runs across these, I'm not sure if it's really just one story, but this run of issues. And so I got these as well. But the Tales of the Green Lantern Corps, numbers 1 through 3, which I have read and I do have notes on, those are from May through July of 1981. So that's about a year after these 4 issues. Now let's see. I think that's about it for my notes following. You know what? There's one other thing I forgot. I think in the last episode I mentioned there was somebody whose first name was Andy who did a sketch or a commission for me of a mashup of Deathlock and Archie. That is Andy Jewett. And I don't know why I couldn't remember his last name, but that's the case. Oh, one other thing, and I think I might correct this, or I might update this in one of the other episodes, but I mentioned the t-shirt for the convention has 2 characters on it, and it's drawn by Stan Sakai and Sergio Aragones. And the characters are, the one I couldn't remember was Usagi Yojimbo, which is this kind of samurai rabbit, or I'm not sure, samurai may not be the right term. I can't remember exactly what Yojimbo means, but it's not exactly the same as a samurai. I'm pretty sure of that. Next episode, I will be talking about day 2 of Heroes Con. If you are downloading these as I'm releasing them, I'm not sure how soon I will get that out. It may be another week before I get that out. So that's it for episode 165 of Dave Talks Comics. Dave Talks Comics can be found at davetalkscomics.com, as well as on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. You can keep up with what I have currently been reading at davetalkscomics.net and what I have been watching at smallscreenscrawls.blogspot.com. I usually update those blogs on a daily or weekly basis. Links to Small Screen Scrawls can be found at davetalkscomics.com or davetalkscomics.net under the Other Blogs header on the right-hand side of the page. That's davetalkscomics.com for the cast, .net for the notes. If you have comments or questions, I can be reached at davetalkscomics@gmail.com, on Twitter at davetalkscomics, or leave a comment on my website. I'm Dave. Thank you for listening.